Matt is a program director at Invest Nebraska, where he leads the Combine Agri-Food Incubator, the Biotech Connector, and the System Management of Venture Portfolio. With that, I'll turn it over to Matt to get us started.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. And thank you off the bat to the Water for Food Institute for the planning, preparation, and marketing for this event. And thank you for everybody either joining live this morning or if you're listening to this recorded after the fact. The goal of this morning is to provide some overview of the Business Innovation Act and then specifically some time for Q&A in regard to companies that might be working in agriculture and value-added ag. But I wanted to start by giving some background on Invest Nebraska. Invest Nebraska and the Department of Economic Development are the founding partners of the Combine Incubator, which many of the people on this call and later watching this call will be familiar with. I'd say what Invest Nebraska is probably most formally known for is providing financial assistance to high growth companies across the state. But for this short couple of slides before we get into the Business Innovation Act information, I want to focus on kind of the back end of our mission statement, and that is advancing the entrepreneurial economy and specifically entrepreneurial infrastructure in agriculture. And if you go ahead and hit to the next slide, please. So for those of you who aren't aware, the Combine is a state initiative led by Invest Nebraska and the Department of Economic Development, as well as partners like the Water for Food Institute, Nebraska Farm Bureau, Nebraska Department of Agriculture. And our goal is to help early stage high growth entrepreneurs that are working in the ag industry help move forward in commercialization, better connect with customers, networking partners, investors, and those in the industry that can help move their business forward. And if you go to the next slide, please. What we do is, in addition to the incubation space where I'm located now at Nebraska Innovation Campus, is operational assistance that probably doesn't look much different from many of the other accelerators, incubators, and technical assistance programs across the country. What we really try to strive ourselves in being the best at is bringing the producers and farmers very early on into this program and connecting those in agriculture with the entrepreneurs to provide valuable, rapid feedback. Next slide, please. A couple of companies that we work with either across the state virtually or in the incubator at Nebraska Innovation Campus. These companies come from a variety of background and industries and are solving unique problems. And the goal for them is to not only solve the problem specifically in their industry, but to continue to build a strong company in the state of Nebraska. Hence the economic development focus from the state as well as from Invest Nebraska. And maybe I think of one or two more slides. The final thing I just wanted to put a plug in for this group and this recording is a ongoing annual event. The On-Ramp Agriculture Conference is a partnership with Department of Economic Development, Invest Nebraska, and a group called Generator out of Madison, Milwaukee. On-Ramp is an annual event. It's a virtual event that connects startups in a kind of a speed dating style with corporations all across the country, as well as some local corporations here in the state. And it's our opportunity to hopefully give the companies that are interested in getting a pitch or a spot in front of some of the corporate VC as well as corporate business development folks in various industries. And I think that is all I have for me. With that, I will make an introduction over to Ben kind of for the bulk of the programming today. Ben, as mentioned, leads Business Innovation Act program for the Department of Economic Development. What we're going to be talking about today is primarily relevant to the prototype grant, but he will touch on a couple other programs and then we'll leave plenty of time for questions. Ben, thanks for joining the call and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Matt. As Matt said, I'm half of the business innovation team at the Department of Economic Development for the state of Nebraska. So economic development is a state agency. We have about 60 people. We touch upon a lot of things that try to bring economic health to the state. That includes innovation, which is myself and Nisha Avey. We have an international team, a recruitment team, some general business assistance, but we also cover housing community development, which is a large portion of what we do. And a good portion of what the Department of Economic Development does is handle pass-through funds. For today's discussion, we are just covering Business Innovation Act. That is a state-funded program. We have about $5.7 million per year. It sometimes varies a little bit, but it's a fiscal year program that runs from July 1st through June 30th. And Nisha and I do all of the application intake, marketing, and kind of application review. We'll talk about the process a little bit as we go on here. I've been with the department since 2012 in some capacities. I've been working on the innovation program since 2014. And then the business innovation programs really kicked off in 2011. They were passed in 2011, approved, and we started taking applications and approving projects in 2012. When we talk about Business Innovation Act, as government, we tend to view things as what authorizes it. So that's the Business Innovation Act, which was passed in 2011. Also, it might be called the Talent and Innovation Initiative or innovation programs. Really, you're looking at the program level. This is a suite of programs, and it shares that pool of funds that we're talking about, that 5.7 million this year. Usually it's between 5 and 6 million, and that's state general funds. So I would say the most popular program we have, and the one that occupies most of my time, is the Prototype Grant Program. It's probably the most appropriate program for the majority of businesses that are starting up and need some product development. And that's what we focus on, is cost related to project development or product development. You need to have a scope of, in order to apply for this, you kind of need to have something budgeted, scoped out, a planned scope of work. And we can provide up to $150,000 in funding per project. That we haven't gone that far. That was actually the cap on the program was $50,000 until 2016 or 2017, when a cleanup bill was passed and modified that. At the same time, we did not get any additional funding, and we typically fund about between 30 and 40 projects a year. And that's what we can do with about, our kind of soft cap of that share of that pool of money, because there are other programs which touch upon, and we'd rather do 30 or 40 rather than 6 or 7 at a 150. So our median award's about $50,000. It really depends on the need, the nature of the project, and kind of what else is. There's some intangibles there that we touch upon, but historically the lowest we've gone is $6,000. The highest we've gone to date is $100,000. It's open to businesses with 500 employees or less. So this is not just for startups, but I'd say the vast majority of the companies that we fund are startups that either are pre-revenue or in their infancy, their first few years of formation. The other kind of customers that we focus on are companies that are bringing new products to the market. So if you're under 500 employees and you have a significant Nebraska presence, in that case, be headquartered here, we have worked with some companies that are doing new product development. They need some assistance with that. So we can reimburse 2/3, 66% of project costs. It is all of our programs are matching programs and reimbursement based. For Prototype, that is 2/3 or 80% if it's agriculture related. We also have another focus, which is bioscience, and there was a separate fund for that, which most of the funding is exhausted, but that was a 50% match, a 1-to-1. So unfortunately, we don't set the rules. So the legislature sets the rules, and that means that we follow them. So there are some idiosyncrasies with all of these different programs and some pitfalls. But the nice thing is that with agriculture related, which is the focus of the discussion today, that is an 80% reimbursement rate. So it's a 4-to-1 match where DED can pick up that 4 parts of, and the 5th needs to be from the company. That can be any private funding. That can be a loan. That can be personal capital. That can be revenue. It can be investment from not the state, but it can be a federal grant if you can manage to match something outside of the SBIRSTTR arena, which we'll touch upon in a minute. But there are some things. What we can't do is we can't match state funds. So if there's another state agency that is receiving funding, we have to look at that pretty closely and make sure that we're not using at least state general funds as the match, and there needs to be some private components, some skin in the game. Numbers as of, I believe this was March of 2020, so before this fiscal year started, we awarded about 12.3 million. Most of that has been utilized, over 253 projects, and that's since the inception of the program. So that's about 9 years. So that's pretty significant. A couple notable companies there, Matt McCord out of Lincoln, Company Cam out of Lincoln. That's a good example. MAMA is a bioscience / animal health company. They do genetic testing, DNA, RNA sequencing in a new fashion, and they have developed a machine. They started in 2014. They received a prototype grant for that and took advantage of some of our other programs later on down the line. Now they're growing and they have a significant staff in North Lincoln. Company Cam was also around the 2014 area. They're a software company. And I will say about 60% of the companies that apply for this program are doing pure software development. So that's Company Cam is a good example of one of the groups. It's for contractors. They take pictures and kind of do assist with making sure that materials are dropped off, work is being done. It's a lightweight style thing. It's composed of something like Builder Trend, but they've had significant traction and retention of customers, and they're up to 30 or 40 employees. So the goal of these is to get things launched, build out a product in the initial stages. We focus, the use of funds is just for product development. So if you're doing software, that's paying for software engineers, UI, UX, maybe some licenses or server expenses, like AWS, things like that. But what we don't cover, or if you're doing hardware, that would also include materials, engineering, design, any sort of contract work. We focus on things that are happening here to the point that we really don't fund things that are happening outside of the state. So if you have an existing relationship with a offshore developer or something like that, that's not something that we're really interested in funding. But if you want to reach out to a developer here, that can be internal or external, either a development firm or a 1099 or an employee doing that. But those are kind of what we focus on. We don't cover general business expenses with this program. So rent, utilities, marketing, legal, all those things that go, all the costs associated with starting up, we're focused just on product development. Well, the other programs in the next slide is seed investment. So when we get there, we'll talk about that a little bit, but that's with Invest Nebraska. So Matt is one of the 3-person team at Invest Nebraska. Nisha Avey at the Department of Economic Development handles most of the activity around seed investment. We're the funding arm, but Invest Nebraska makes the decisions in terms of who they would like to fund. So they do the due diligence. They have a board that reviews and approves projects, and they make and hold the investment. As a nonprofit venture capital firm that is focused on improving the underlying economic health of the state of Nebraska, they have a double bottom line of return on investment, and any return would go into an evergreen fund so they could continue this. If the Business Innovation Act programs go away, Invest Nebraska could still exist as an entity and make early stage investments. And they also are focused on economic development in the sense that they might be interested in projects that are longer term. They're going to be held for longer than that 5 to 7 year window that a VC might typically want to see an exit in. They would like to see exits. I don't want to put that past them, but they also want to see the project is going to be a benefit to the state of Nebraska. So they need to focus on Nebraska-based companies. It is not a grant program. It's an equity investment. We get that question a lot. It's up to $500,000. That also needs to be matched. They need to be part of a round. I'd say the typical first time funding is usually between $100,000 and $250,000, as opposed to that full $500,000. but that's something to discuss with Invest Nebraska. If we have the capacity and the project merits it, then we could go up to that $500,000 in investment. It doesn't need to be that one-to-one match, so it needs to be $500,000 or a one-to-one match on any sort of investment. Invest Nebraska also provides technical assistance. So in addition to the combine, Ben Williamson and Dan Hoffman will also meet and help people and early stage companies with negotiating things and syndicating deals as well. So they have a network of people that they communicate with to assist. I always recommend that they be, if you're looking at raising money, you talk to Invest Nebraska, at least to see about structuring any sort of deal, even if that's angel, even if they're not involved. They provide technical assistance and can help you navigate that minefield without any cost to you. So that funding can be used for commercialization. So that is your operating expenses, those are things. And Prototype is kind of a feeder program, I would say. A lot of the companies that started via Prototype grants, where they might get some initial capital together, they leverage our grant program to develop a product, get some traction, and then they apply for seed investment. So there's no requirement, obviously, but it's a great opportunity to kind of move forward. We've done $13.9 million invested, 61 investment rounds. There have been some follow-on rounds. I say rounds instead of companies invested since 2011. Ops Compass is my example there. They started with a Prototype grant a while back, then they're focused on providing a cloud framework for or an Azure compliance framework for Microsoft Azure. I might be a little bit off there, Foley, but you're nodding along, so I'm pretty close. It's not something that it's a good example of something that you don't see a lot of in Nebraska, which is these high growth high tech companies, and I think that's a good example of what we're looking for as an opportunity to get some of that thing happening. They're based out of Omaha. Next slide, please. The other program that I manage directly, so I'm Prototype and academic R&D for the vast majority of the time, although we kind of cross over since we're a two-person team, is the academic R&D grant. This is for companies that are doing applied research and development in conjunction with the Nebraska College or University. So this is a great opportunity to get some of that information out of that off the shelf or out of the minds of the academics and into the marketplace. And I always emphasize the applied research and development. We have had projects where the person doing the R&D is also a university professor, but this needs to go to a business that has a plan to commercialize it. So we don't do pure research or primary research just for research sake. It is something that where you're doing essentially research and development or validation of an existing product that will lead to commercialization. So that's up to, and this is the biggest program we have. This is up to $100,000 for a phase 1 and $400,000 for a phase 2. It's a 1-to-1 match program, but we still retain that 4-to-1 match for value-added agriculture. So we either reimburse 50% for the majority of projects that are not related to agriculture, or 80% for the agriculture-related ones. So, if you do the math, you get up to $500,000 in grant funds for $125,000 if you're in the agricultural space. I will say that we don't do a lot of phase 2 because that is a shared pool of funds, and we've done some kind of lower value phase 2s in the past, but we've done. I was just looking yesterday at one of the projects that is approaching completion, commercialization. We did a total of $414,000 over 2 phases. Virtual Incision is down the hall from Matt. They are a university spinoff that is founded working with New Tech, and they are a surgical robot. We did a phase 1 and a phase 2 to assist them with their FDA trial preparation because they had to develop a number of these devices to do testing for FDA approval. New Tech Food Science is also based out of Innovation Campus, and they also have an Omaha location. They did a lot of research with the Food Processing Center under the Value Added Agriculture umbrella, which we'll touch upon a little bit more here. And so they've done, I believe, 2 or 3 projects where they've done food stuff or food additive product development with the Food Processing Center. I like to point that out because the Food Processing Center is university adjacent. It is not a department necessarily. While they have professors and people that work there, they also have staff that work there that work with private industry. So Ops Compass actually worked with Nebraska Applied Research Institute out of Omaha, which is a cloud computing security and focused on operational operational technology as opposed to informational technology. They did a project with that group. We've done projects with the Holland Computing Center out of, which is technically UNL, but located at UNL. And Food Processing Center has seen their fair share of projects with foodstuff development, and that would be our preference for foodstuff development is that they work with the university. The other projects we've seen is the Animal Science Department does really well with doing validation studies. We've done a lot of feed trials for cattle, swine, chicken, different, as an agriculture state, that is a value-added agriculture thing where you're moving it up the value chain. You're looking at different feed stocks for either animal or biotechnology, and that's when the Animal Science Department has actually done really well in leveraging our programs to assist with companies that are seeking their expertise. We've done $10 million from 93 project phases since 2011, a little bit more since that we're probably over 100 at this point because we've approved some in the last little while. Next slide, please. And the last program, which Nisha handles, my colleague, is the SBIRSTTR or STTR, Small Business Innovation Research, Small Business Tech Transfer. There's, I believe, 11 federal agencies that have solicitations. They're open calls for submissions and they're trying to do one of 2 things. Either they're trying to solve a problem or get technology into the marketplace that assists is small business related in the sense that small businesses are the ones implementing it, and they usually have their own emphasis. So USDA is focused on agriculture. NASA might be focused on weather or rocketry or whatever. I mean, there's all these different agencies that do this. Of those 11, about half of the funding goes to the Department of Defense. There's a company out of Roca that has done really well. They have their ex-military and they are leveraging this, and they've developed a number of different things. I will say DoD is usually looking to implement whatever they're funding. So they might be looking for an anti-torpedo system or a new shower for a battleship, whatever it might be. A lot of times the federal government is mandated to kind of approach this through the SBIR program and try to get small businesses a chance to contract with the government, especially on the military side, or in other cases, the USDA and the more open agencies, sometimes they have omnibus solicitations where they're saying, well, give us your best pitch, see how this will help you as a business and move, what's novel about it. It's more like our programs in that sense. So the Phase 0 program is up to $5,000 just to hire a grant writer or a technical reviewer to assist with your chance of receiving an SBI or STTR. And the difference, and I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole because it's not my program, but Small Business Innovation Research is Small Business Tech Transfer is usually taking a technology from the university and bringing it to the marketplace. SBIR doesn't have to be university related. Our Phase 0 program will pay up to $5,000, no match required, to hire somebody, hopefully locally, to assist with that application review or preparation. We do need to get a request, and that's like a 3-page application. It's very easy, from you 30 days before that solicitation closes. That's written into statute. You do need to have a good chance of receiving it. You'd have to have a good plan and team put together. So I would work with Nisha if you have questions about that. Each agency, they do solicitations maybe every 6 months, and it takes about 3 to 6 months to hear back from the federal agency that you apply to, whether or not you accept it. Like I said, it is competitive. That's why we have the Phase 0 program. I've heard anywhere from 1 out of 8 or 1 out of 12 applications are actually funded. If you do receive a SBIR or STTR and you notify us within 45 days of that letter being issued, you can get a matching grant from the state for up to 65% of that federal award, up to $100,000. So anything near or above $150,000 can get you another $100,000. You can use that for similar activities that you would under our other programs, which is employee wages. You can do materials, you can buy equipment, you can, and it's a little more permissive because I think we can cover some of those things that are operational related that are our other programs that I kind of carved out. And the reason for that is because this is a multi-phase program as well. Usually there's a phase 1, phase 2. The feds definitely do a winnowing process where if you're, they might have a phase 1 and they might fund 4 to 6 people. At the phase 2 level, especially if they're looking to purchase that, then they might go down to 1 or 2 and reach a final decision on who they're going to go with. So the phase 2 is competitive as well, and maybe 1 out of 3 actually get funded. We feel that if you get a match for a phase 1, you're going to be able to expand that scope of work. We're getting some federal dollars of assistance in there into the state, and that really hopefully can make you more competitive in the phase 2 level as well. You do need to be doing 51% of the project within the state. So if you have a disseminated team or something like that that's across multiple states, we need to know that you have a significant presence here and that at least 51% of the work will be in Nebraska. Since this program is contingent upon receiving a federal award, we've only done $4.8 million of that over 107 project phases, including SBIR phase 0s, which are probably at least 2/3 of those projects, with a match of about $18.4 million in federal funding. So that's a great win for us, a great way to leverage some of that. So the 2 examples there, Sango Diagnostics and Therapeutics is out of UNMC. They're doing cancer research or cancer detection for pancreatic cancer using a blood test. Ignis was also a university spinoff out of UNL, or at least a couple of university professors, and I believe they had to work through new tech for that. They do drone prescribed burns, so they have a little hopper on top of a drone that can drop small ping pong size balls that ignite. So if you're doing wildfires, which are obviously, or management of state or federal lands or private lands, they can go out there and either under a service or a sales model, they can assist with doing prescribed burns to prevent wildfires. Obviously something that's topical and germane now. So they've had great success with the Department of the Interior, I believe, Federal Park Service. So next slide, please. So everyone wants to know what's our application review process. We use an online application portal. The easiest way to find all of our programs is go to opportunity.nebraska.gov/BIA. That's the shortcut, or you can just go to our website and search for type R&D, SBI, or whatever you are interested in. We have an open application cycle. So unlike the feds and a lot of the other programs that DED manages, we don't have deadlines per se. We start taking applications on or before July 1st of every year, and we go until our funds are exhausted. Last year we had a funding, it was kind of an anomalous year. We had a funding shortfall. We awarded our final awards for last year from July 1st was November 18th. So Then we had a wait list that we put together, and we had about 100 people waiting this year when we opened things up on June 1st. So it's open. We review projects every 1 to 3 weeks. We're kind of, due to everybody working virtually, it's kind of throwing a wrench in. Normally we'd have every other week a standing meeting to review projects. We try to get an answer to you in under a month. So I would say that that's the longest timeline you're looking at. Unlike the SBIR program or some of the federal programs, you're hopefully not going to be waiting a long time. But something you should be aware of is that because we try to expedite the review process and because of the way the statute is worded, we only pay for things that are incurred within the contract period. So if you have a project that you, with some significant expenses, anything that's incurred or invoiced prior to the date of approval, which would be after our review, is not eligible for reimbursement. The way that we, and we have a 3-person internal review committee made up of employees at DED. They look at everything. It's an advocacy model. So typically when you apply, Nisha, I take an initial look at the application, try to anticipate questions from our review committee, have a discussion, sit down, see if anything needs to be modified, changed, or expanded upon, mostly. If we need additional information, we'll seek that. Once it's ready, we'll lock it in, send it to our 3-person committee, and then we facilitate the discussion, either Nisha or I, and they make the decision whether to fund it, what level to fund it at. So for prototype, one of the questions I get a lot is, what should I ask for? You can ask for whatever you need, whatever your product development. If you can substantiate that you think it's going to cost $300,000, you're more than welcome to ask for the max. But you have to understand that we're going to come back with an offer and say, well, we can't do 150, but here's 60, here's 70, whatever it might be. And you need to try to rescope if you want to utilize the program. So that's something to be aware of. If you are approved, you can start incurring costs as of the date of approval. As soon as you get an email, we do a contract and we set you up with an ACH and W-9 so that we can do direct deposits. You make requests on an ad hoc basis, whatever the timeline you feel comfortable with, but they need to be accompanied by documentation of expenses. So invoices, timesheets, proof of payment is also a component of that. So you do need to pay for that thing. If you are working under a normal prototype grant and you incur a cost of $15,000 for software development, you would pay that. You'd submit that invoice and proof of payment to us. We would pay $10,000 to your business bank account. If it was agriculture related, it'd be $12,000 because of that 80%. The guidelines have the contract timelines for specific programs. Be aware that for prototype, we can't go past 2 years. So this is not intended to support companies for a long period of time. It is intended to rapidly accelerate the pace of development. And our standard contract timeline is 12 months. Most of our grantees are done within 6 to 9 months. And that's the hope that they would, most of the projects would take about that long. There are some retention and clawback information in the program contract. So when you sign a contract with the state to utilize these programs, do be aware that for the majority of them, you need to maintain a presence with the state for a minimum of 3 years and make a good faith effort to commercialize the product. And the second one is very easily satisfied by providing some information about how the project went and how you're moving forward. If for some reason the project is not working out, we'd rather know ahead of time and part ways and cease development work. And we tend not to try to claw back any funds there. We've never had to exercise the clawback provision. If you do decide to leave the state, relocate voluntarily, or you have an exit event where somebody decides to acquire you and cease operations within the state, that would trigger a clawback of the principal that we provided. Next page, please. Slide, please. That value-added agriculture, that match, just to further elaborate upon that, it is 80% for any program. So if it's, it just doesn't really affect SBIR because of the award numbers. So you're still capped at $100,000. You still need to apply for one of the programs. So if you're doing product development for agriculture, you should probably apply for prototype. If you're working with the university, or you should be working with the university, you should apply for that. It's just we would reimburse instead of 66% for a prototype or 50% for R&D, we could do up to 80%. There's a whole page and a half of information on what constitutes value-added ag in statute. We leave that, the way that DED approaches it is you can make that request, and all it is a line, like a checkbox in the application form for prototype, R&D, whatever. So if you're applying for the value-added ag match, you just check that box, and then we decide as an agency whether it fits. And if we need to consult our legal staff, we will. But essentially, they need to increase the efficiency or profitability of farming and ranching in Nebraska. So be using developing a product here that you can sell. It doesn't have to be sold just here, and it probably shouldn't just be sold here, but it needs to either move something up the value chain or increase the efficiency, which would be something like equipment. So examples: ag equipment manufacturing, precision ag with sensors and things like that, animal health, industrial biotech, moving a feedstock up the value chain. Ethanol production is an example of that. Animal feed, animal science department at UNL does a lot of that. And food products, and move anything raw material up the value chain. Processing beef into another higher value product, consumer product. That would be something, or any sort of feedstock. The application, and as I said, application is similar to a regular BI project. DED verifies the value-added agriculture eligibility. I can give a judgment call, and I do, to people that ask, does this make sense? And I can give you a fuzzy answer as to whether or not you should apply for that. So if you have questions, you're definitely welcome to consult with Nisha or I. We have a lot of people who might try to get that match by saying, well, you can use it in agriculture. That's not always the best. My analogy I go to is, I say, like a pickup truck. A pickup truck can be used on a farm, but it's not just meant for a farm. A combine is something that is only used really for agriculture, and it's principally for agriculture. So that's kind of where you're at. If you have a product that the use case is intended for agriculture, then we can maybe, if that makes sense and that's what the pitch is, then that makes sense. But if there's a lot of different uses and that's just one of them, then it probably doesn't fit the value-added agriculture mold. Next slide, please. A couple of recommendations just from me. This is my personal thoughts, and something that, from my experience in managing these programs, something that's requested for this specific webinar. And I think it's valuable for not just our programs, but also kind of every grant program or investment thing that you are undertaking as entrepreneurs. So here's my thoughts, my bullet points. One is understand your audience. And for DED, you need to acknowledge the goal of the program, which is that we want a return on investment for the state. For a state-funded program, we want to see development of we're looking to create jobs and add revenue that can be taxed. So what does that look like? We don't want low income jobs. We don't want to create things. This is not a something that we're doing out of the goodness of our heart necessarily. We want to choose projects that are going to hopefully benefit the state over time. And if you're applying for seed investment, then they might be looking for a return on investment in the form of a multiple exit. So you need to go into it and acknowledge what they're looking for. The feds are looking for, you need to answer a solicitation for the SBIR program that is appropriate for you, and they feel that you have a good chance of accomplishing. So understand what the goals of the program are and acknowledge that, and focus your business plan about that. Also, you're applying to, in our case, you're applying to lay people. So if you're a highly technical company or solution or product, you do need to explain any sort of jargon or acronyms in your business plan, and kind of keep it to a level that's understandable. I would say that that's usually not an issue as much, but it's something that we have encountered in the past. If you're applying to SBIRSTTR, they have groups of subject matter experts, and you really should target that technical language and be fully, in depth and answer according to their guidelines. So ours is a little bit higher level, then you should be able to answer those questions, but look at who you're applying to and get to know them. Have an open narrative, be clear about what the project entails, and be honest about your possible efficiencies. So for prototype, we ask for a business plan, an application, and evidence matching funds. We also allow you to submit letters of interest or intent or from customers and other things, but no one project is perfect. Your team might be a little bit deficient. Address that. Don't try to sweep it under the rug. Say, okay, we're missing this, but we're going to solve it via this thing. Really go out there and get some budget details. A lot of people will ask for funding, but don't really have a use for it. They might just say, I would just like $60,000. Well, that's not going to get you funded. You need to know exactly how you're going to use that, and understand that might get thrown out the window as soon as you receive funding. But you need to have a plan or planning. Validation is a big thing. That's the lean startup methodology, and Matt touched upon it as well. So validate your assumptions. Go out there and talk to people. Get potential customer feedback and prove that to us. There's a much higher chance of getting funding, especially for prototype, if you talk to people and you submit some sort of documentation, email, letter saying, hey, this is a problem I have as a customer, and this is a solution I want to see in the marketplace. Without that, absent that, it's really hard, because you're making a statement that we don't necessarily know is true. So, and then build out your budget based on real bids. That touches back upon the what the project entails is go out there and get bids. Don't spitball necessarily. If you need materials, figure out what that material list looks like, and really build your budget around that. And then lastly, don't operate in a vacuum. Build a team. If you don't have a team, have another set of eyes to review your business plan application. That goes back to the jargon and acronyms. Have your mom look at it. Have your spouse look at it if they're not associated with the project. Have whoever you can get to look at it. Make sure that it makes sense to them. And then take advantage of the professional resources. NBDC, the Nebraska Business Development Center, Invest Nebraska. Like I said, they provide technical assistance. There's also the Startup Collaborative in Omaha, and Motion in Lincoln is relaunching. There's a lot of different places that can guide you, and there's SCORE out of Greater Nebraska. So you've got a lot of different paths to go down, a lot of people who will help you without any cost or with a minimal cost. In the case of NBDC, I think they charge some negligible fees for certain things, but they provide a lot. They're funded by the SBA, and they provide a lot of free services as well. Lastly, don't listen to feedback from us, from the people, the grant administrators. If you're applying for a grant, from all those people you talk to, take that to heart. And really, and this is a selfish thing for me, if you are applying for a grant and I say, hey, you need to focus on X, Y, and Z, do that, because I've seen what our review committee is focused on, and I know how certain things are going to be received. So not every project gets funded, and I can't anticipate everything, but we try to give you the best possible chance, and that's why we have kind of an open application process, is to have one set of eyes look at it, see if they understand it, and then allow you to revise or add additional information necessary to kind of give you the best possible chance of being funded. So with that, I think I'm done, Molly. There's our contact information. It's best to reach out via email. I'm happy to set up times for an informational session for about half an hour to talk about your project and what might be most appropriate. Nisha handles the SBIR and STTR, most of the seed work. I would also encourage you to reach out directly to Invest Nebraska if you think that you are ready for funding. She also handles micro enterprise, which is if you're a traditional business and you're interested in a loan, she can contact you with the company or the nonprofits that do some loan programs. Micro loans are between $5,000 and $50,000 of assistance that businesses might not be able to receive traditional funding for. So with that, I will kick it back if anybody has any questions, or Matt, if you want to have anything else, I'd be happy to answer things now.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben. I have a couple questions I wanted to ask you before we wrapped up on the top of the hour, but that being said, if anyone does have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat and we'll do our best to get to them. So specifically to the prototype grant, you talked a little bit about use of funds. I feel like this is a question that I get from potential applicants or applicants that have taken a look at the portal. For use of funds, you stress having a good team, but also at the same time as capital that needs to be spent within the state of Nebraska. So can you talk a little bit about some of these applicants might have a technical co-founder that could do it themselves. So in that case, maybe the money is spent within the team, but other times it needs to be an outsource or a third-party contractor. Can you tell us a little bit more some of the questions you receive regarding that area?
Yeah, a lot of people ask if they can draw a salary on this, and the short answer is it depends, because it really comes down to, we would prefer to, the way I view this and the way the program has evolved is that we're trying to accelerate the pace of development. And if you're bootstrapping this, especially if you're a solo entrepreneur, it doesn't make a lot of sense to pay somebody to quit their job and do something. We would rather they hire somebody, they bring somebody on. So our preference is to, as part of our metrics is to increase employment, is for somebody to hire somebody or contract with somebody to move things along faster. And the other issue therein is that we don't have a lot of control if we're paying a founder over a good use of funds. So we don't want to personally enrich somebody drawing an egregious salary. If you're paying somebody else and you have skin in the game, it makes sense, that you would, cap that at a reasonable level. So where the line blurs a little bit is when you do have a technical co-founder, and maybe you have somebody who's the head of the operation, they're the CEO, and their co-founder might be the back of the house person, and they are spending the majority of their time, nose to the grindstone trying to get things done. We'll look at a reasonable compensation level for that. I think it's we've gone back and forth on that. It's not as strong of an application as, and really you should be looking at this from the aspect of maybe you have a technical co-founder that's a full stack developer, but they really are not great at UI UX development, or maybe their back end skills are a little rusty. So they need to hire somebody to bring somebody on and do that. So I would say that's one example where we might look at compensating an employer, but our preference for most is wages of employees, contract developers, and materials, and the materials can pretty much be sourced from anywhere. Any sort of actual labor being done, we would prefer that it be done in Nebraska, and most projects that we approve are done in Nebraska.
Helpful, thank you. We had one question coming in. This is, with respect to the prototype grant, can you explain how the HQ or operations of the company is assessed?
It really depends on how big the company is. If you're one person, like, where do you live? If you're and sometimes, since we're focused on startups, there might be a distributed team, and it's kind of hit or miss whether or not it gets funded, because we're looking at, what is the future plan for the people that are located here. So we've funded projects also where people have come in for incubators, and then they might stick around for 3 months, apply for a grant, maybe even do some development work via grant money, and then they leave and go on to the next incubator, accelerator, they go back home. We want people with ties here or have a reason to be here and have boots on the ground. So at minimum, in order to qualify, you need somebody here. We have funded some projects under like academic R&D where they have an individual working with the university at UNL, and maybe there's a strong potential that they continue to grow that team here. So those are more on faith, but there's no hard and fast. I would say the minimum you need to have somebody present. Headquarters wise, I think that's something that Invest Nebraska would look at more closely. Like, where's most of your team? Where's your founder live? Where are your offices at? You know, that's I would say it really depends on the program. And as we stated, SBIR just need to be doing 51% of the work here. And I will say legally, you need to be registered with the Nebraska Secretary of State in order to get any funds. So hopefully that addresses your question. Somebody needs to be physically present within the state. Headquartered, that line can be, you know, we might need to make a judgment call on how that works.
Yeah, that's a good answer. And for Invest Nebraska, it's really the same. I mean, we use the term Nebraska footprint, but we also recognize that, as you mentioned, it's a double bottom line scorecard that we're looking at. And the first priority is how many jobs could this create within the state of Nebraska? So I'll give you an example. One company we invested in, Open Doors, they work with NFL, MLB, NBA. We know realistically for the company to do well, they're going to have to hire folks in Chicago, Boston, New York. That being said, all their developers, all their customer service, marketing, the entire kind of back end of the company is located right here in Lincoln. So we know long-term for the company to do well, it would not be in their best interest if we restricted them that every job has to be in Nebraska. But it's with the understanding of the founding team that they're always going to be continuing to hire Nebraskans for other operations. I only had one final question. So Kate, after this, feel free to conclude, but I guess, Ben, you have an interesting position because you kind of get to see the very top of the funnel. For Invest Nebraska, we see companies a little later stage, maybe post-prototype grant, as you mentioned. But just from your personal and professional opinion, what kind of area of agriculture for this conversation is exciting you most, whether it be certain applicants are reaching out, learning about the program, or an area of agriculture you see the most opportunity for innovation in?
And I'm a layperson, and I'm not even a Nebraska native. I grew up in Michigan. I've learned a lot about agriculture, and I think that what's most interesting to me is a lot of the different sectors that we discussed is when we get companies, and these are not things that the general person might be aware of, but industrial biotechnology Nebraska has such a strong opportunity to move feedstocks up the value chain. Since we produce so much feedstock, anything that can convert corn or wheat or soy into a product that is much more valuable, either as a component or direct to consumer, those are interesting. Personally, and sorry, I think we also get a lot of reception for precision ag. Anything sensor related, I tend to like the idea of low cost sensors, a network, reducing. Obviously, labor is an issue, and anything that kind of does things more efficiently. We've done a lot with precision ag. We've done a lot with agricultural machinery, which is neat. I always like hardware projects because of the fact that it's something tangible. So we've done like a crop overseeder, which is a 120-foot boom arm attached to a trailer that seeds over the top of, does the fills in and does cover crops in between row crops. Those are kind of interesting to me because you can see the direct relation between our dollars and what the output is. And probably my pet thing that maybe people aren't as excited about as, or maybe our other members of DED aren't as excited about is, I like to see people who are passionate about bringing new crops to non-traditional crops to the Nebraska market. So people who are interested in farming something different. And I think that if they can make an economic argument that it makes sense, and they're doing a lot of research, and one of our grantees is Midwest Hops, and they're out of Plattsmouth, I believe. They essentially stood up the not just they did an organization, a professional organization, as hops growers. They've built this from the ground up. They've developed equipment for harvesting and processing hops, and they have put in hops and done a lot of research on us with assistance from the university on what sort of hops will grow in Nebraska. That's kind of an interesting thing to me, where you provide some diversity. As corn prices go down, people might be interested in hedging in certain ways and providing, growing different crops. And I think that from what I've seen, a lot of the younger, more entrepreneurial farmers are interested in maybe diversifying their operations. I may be off base there, but personally, I think it makes sense and it excites me more than some other projects.
Awesome.
Good.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Ben, Matt, for the discussion and all of the great information that you shared. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed this today and learned lots. Ben and Matt are both incredible resources in the state in terms of information for startups. So, feel free to reach out to them moving forward. Thanks, Matt, Ben. Take care, everyone.